Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Avengers Endgame. And I enjoyed this movie, but since I've technically seen it, it's like 1 3/4 time, because I went and I saw it on Thursday night, but unfortunately a power outage happened, and I didn't get to see the last like 20 to 30 minutes of it. But had plans to see it again at another theater, and I was able to see it all the way through. And when I got to the end of it, it's not that I didn't like how the ending, like the actual endings for certain characters. It's just, it's strange for me to have this problem where usually if you've seen some of my videos on this channel, I usually like it when characters and their choices and decisions are the things driving the plots. It was almost, and I really don't like it when a plot forces a character to do something outside of their usual kind of wheelhouse. And it kind of makes the character kind of not as firm as it should be. Here, it seemed like they needed to get to certain character endpoints, which would seem kind of more plot driven, but they give them certain endings that just start kind of messing with what's happened before. And that's mainly because the entire concept of the second act of this movie is what kind of bangs on it. Now, is this a horrible movie? And I'm going to say, these things completely and utterly destroy everything. No, but they create problems. And problems bigger than I would have liked to occur. So, this starts off with pretty much Act 1, which is essentially tying up what happened after Avengers Infinity War. We actually start off seeing Clint Barton, Hawkeye, having a picnic with his family under house arrest. He's teaching his daughter how to shoot bow and arrow. His two sons are playing catch while his wife is getting all the food together and all that. And they're bantering back and forth. He tells his daughter to go get an arrow, and he kind of looks away from everything for a little bit, and then everybody's disappeared. His whole family was taken out by Thanos' snap. And it's just chilling and heartbreaking to see it happen that way. Then we see that we shift over and we see that Tony is bonding with Nebula. And this is really good. I like seeing these two kind of characters who really hadn't really interacted before. Just kind of doing stuff, playing paper football and all that. And Tony kind of narrating his kind of final wishes pretty much to his helmet for Pepper. And as he just kind of is dealing with running out of food, running out of oxygen, and not being able to go anywhere because of their fuel. And he kind of goes to sleep, but a really kind of cool part you see is that Nebula picks him up and puts him in a chair to sleep. It's a small thing you would think, but it's a great kind of thing character-wise between the two, in that it's been about 3 weeks since the snap happened, and they've still kind of got that kind of a rampart together, even since they've been forced into this relationship. Then, of course, we see that Captain Marvel is able to find him and bring him home to the Avengers compound. And we see that Pepper did indeed survive the snap, thank God. And they kind of get the situation going. Tony, of course, is pissed off at Cap for not being there, but it's kind of weird. I think Tony kind of overreacts a little bit, because he says, yeah, you'd say we'd lose together too, but we didn't. And I'm like, he kind of did. Now, I understand he's had to deal with like infections and everything, and he's pissed off at everybody and himself, and he's wondering what's going on with Thor, and Rocket's like, he thinks he failed. That's going around a lot lately. And, of course, Carol wants to go off and beat the shit out of Thanos, thinking that you guys didn't have me. And, of course, Romanoff's like, hey, we usually kind of like to do this shit as a team, and they don't even have any coordinates for Thanos yet. But, of course, Nebula is able to drop the pertinent information that he wanted to go to the garden after this happened. And it was a world. They were able to trace the cosmic energy that had been given off in the snap on Earth, and they found it 2 days ago on this other planet. So they get everything together. They get their team together. We get Thor, Nebula, Rhodey, Cap, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, and everybody together, and they shoot off into space, and Carol goes down and sees that it's just Thanos on there, and we see that he's just doing farming bit, but he moves kind of weird. His arm that has the gauntlet on it is kind of swaying by his side kind of strangely, and that he picks this thing up, but he's not really moving his arm very naturally. He goes back into the house. His leg that's on the same side as the gauntlet is being dragged behind him kind of, and he's limping, and he's making his food and everything, and we see our avenging team come in. Captain Marvel bangs on him at first. Banner grabs him in the Veronica suit. Rhodey gets one of his other arms, and Thor just comes in and chops his arm off. I'm like, yeah, that's how I would have done it. They take off the gauntlet, and Rocket tips it over, and we see that the stones are gone. And Thanos goes, yeah, I used the stones to destroy the stones. It almost killed me. Everything's worked out right, so that only served as temptation. And, of course, they're hitting on him like, you're lying. And Nebula's like, no, my father's many things, but he's not a liar. And then he starts kind of saying, you know what? I think I treated you a little bit harshly. But Thor's had enough of it and chops his head off, saying that he went for the head, and they kind of feel like failures, and that's how it takes off. And they go fade to black, and we go to 5 years later. It's like, holy shit. We see how it's changed. Cap's had a support group for people dealing with everything that's happened after the decimation, seeing how people like go on dates and they still have to try and deal with it. Steve being like, yeah, we have to move on, even though you can tell he hasn't moved on. We see that Nebula and Rocket are a group, and they're reporting to Natasha. I like that she kind of took more of a kind of head role. She's like making her sandwich and all that, and trying to figure out what's going on. And she's getting reports from Okoye and saying that, like, hey, there was just an earthquake. We just do nothing with it. Marvel, of course, is just staying in space because she has to deal with so much other stuff going on up there. And Rhodey gives her the lowdown on Clinton that he took out like a cartel in Mexico, and that he has just gone on a warpath, and it's kind of understandable. We don't go too much into it, but we see it later on as he's brought back in that his family didn't survive the snap, and yet certain criminal elements did, and that's an injustice that he will right by taking them out. No holds barred. It's like, jeez. Of course, that's when Steve kind of brings in, and they're kind of trying to deal with everything. But while that was going on, we saw that at a fortuitous time, a rat goes over the old brown van control board, and Scott Lang is spit out of the quantum realm. He's like, what the fuck is going on around here? He's like, oh god. A kid kind of blasted by, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And he goes, and there's these memorials to all of those that have vanished, and he's like going, trying to find his daughter and all that, and he sees that he's the one on there. Scott Lang is like, what? And he goes to his house, and he sees his daughter 5 years older, and she's happy to see him, and he's happy to see her. And that's when our story kind of starts syncing up, and we start moving into Act 2. We see that Scott Lang is at the Avengers compound. He's like, hey, I know you guys have no Ant-Man, and what happens is Scott takes over a good portion of this, and I'm happy for that. He gets such a kind of central role in this, and we see him reacting to all these different heroes and what's going on, and it's just cool to see that. He goes in, he starts explaining what happened to him, and Natasha's like, I'm sorry we left you in there for 5 years, and you don't understand. It was 5 years out here, it was 5 hours for me in there. If we could figure out how to like go in there and exit at certain coordinates, and Steve's like, you're talking about a time machine, and he's like, yeah, I'm talking about a time machine, so we need a big brain to figure this out. So they go to Tony's house, and we've seen that he is, of course, married to Pepper, and they have a cute little daughter named Morgan, and of course you can see she got into Tony's garage and was messing around with a helmet and all that. He was going to get her lunch and all that kind of stuff, but of course, our heroes come back in, and we see that Tony still resents Cap, and because he only really nods to Natasha, and he just lays into Scott's plan, saying, "You're not really basing this shit off Back to the Future, are you?" He's like, "No," and he's like, "No, messing with time. I got too much that I need to protect. You guys can stay for lunch, but only if you don't talk shop." And of course, they're like, "All right, Tony's not going to help us. We'll have to find another big brain." Scott's like, who would we find? Then we see that Bruce Banner has gone into the Professor Hulk realm and decided to merge his intellect with the Hulk because he explains that it was a double whammy. Hulk failed first, then Banner. So he's permanently in Hulk form, and just seeing him with all the giant food, seeing fans coming for the Hulk, doing selfies. Scott like, "Hey, you want one with Ant-Man?" It's like, "Oh no," and that whole little situation was funny. And he's like, "Time travel's not really my expertise, but let's go with it." And then we get some funny little bits where we see that they mess with Lang, and he gets turned into a kid at first, then he gets turned into a baby, and just seeing Steve freak out, being like, Bruce, we need to get him back to normal. He's a baby now, man. It's his exasperation of like, God, the shit I have to deal with. But he's not like really mad at Bruce that he's turned into an old man, and they finally got him back to normal. While this is going on, Tony was able to figure out how to do the time travel. He's like, "Oh shit." And of course he's talking with Pepper. He's like, "Listen, I can throw this in the lake and just go to bed." And she's like, "But would you be able to rest?" Because that's a big thing. This is a great film for the arc of like Tony, Thor, and Cap. I really like that they focused on those main three and just getting at least their respective journeys at this point to the end. So, Tony, of course, pops up, gives Cap his shield back, saying, "Resentment's corrosive, screw that, let's do this. My objective is to try and get back what we lost, and to make sure that I don't lose what I have." And Cap's like, "Yeah, of course, that's the deal." So, they start figuring out, alright, we need the whole team together. So they decide to send Bruce and Rocket to go get Thor. And we find out that they've got a new Asgard in Norway, and they meet up, and Valkyrie survived the snap, and she said that he's not good. He only comes down for pretty much supplies once a month. And they go up, and we see that Thor has not dealt with this very well. He has just been drinking and let himself get fat and not. He's felt like a failure, so he's like, whatever. He essentially is a combination of usually what happens to Odin sometimes in the comics. Not the whole fat bit, but just drinking and wallowing in the failure that had happened. And yeah, everything's okay. He at first thought they were there to fix the cable and all that. We see that some of his friends from Ragnarok are there. Korg is playing Fortnite and everything. See Thor yelling at a kid over the internet. It's like, yeah. But of course, Bruce lays it down for him and says that they might have a way to undo what Thanos did. And even hearing the name Thanos is like hearing the name Voldemort in Harry Potter. He's like, "You don't say that name here." And he just feels like he can't fix anything. And Bruce is like, "Hey, listen, I was in a spot like this too, man. You helped me out of it. Let me help you." And Rocket was able to get him to join because it's like, "Hey, we got beer on the ship." He's like, "What kind?" They go off. We get some Big Lebowski jokes, but Thor is just everybody failed, but Thor failed magnitudes more than anything else. You know what I mean? The worst part is he was the one that was able to kill Thanos, and it didn't even matter. He had lost so many of his Asgardian brethren during Ragnarok. He had lost his home, and then he lost even more of them when Thanos came, and he then lost more with the snap, and he wasn't able to do anything. And it's hard seeing him like that, and it sucks when he comes in and they get everything together and they figure out what they need to do. They're like, "Okay, we need to get the Infinity Stones and pull off a time heist." Now, I like that idea and essentially making an Ocean's kind of movie where they're stealing Infinity Stones from the past to assemble the Infinity Gauntlet to undo the damage. my issues with the execution. Whenever you have a time travel storyline, you have to be very careful in what you do with the time traveling aspects. They go to better if it was tied neater together. I mean, I like seeing all these different kind of flashbacks. This was definitely an homage for the first three phases of the Marvel Universe and capping this off. But as we see going through, things start screwing up. We do figure out that there was 3 Infinity Stones in New York at one time. And then, of course, they were separated into 3 teams, essentially, to go get the 3 in New York, the Aether from, of course, Thor Dark World, and then, of course, during Guardians of the Galaxy, the Power Stone and the Soul Stone. So they centralize on like the Battle of New York and the aftermath for the Tesseract, the Mind Stone, and the Time Stone. Thor and Rocket go after the Aether, the Reality Stone, and we get Rhodey and Nebula going after the Power Stone, and Clint and Natasha going after the Soul Stone, because they had gotten him out of Tokyo. Natasha was able to do that. Let's see here. Let's get through like the broad strokes first. We get our team going into the Battle of New York. That's kind of funny. We see the Hulk kind of moving around. He goes after the Time Stone. We see that Cap is the one going after the Mind Stone, and we see Lang and Tony going after the Tesseract. So Banner has to deal with what's going on with. He thought that he was going to be meeting Doctor Strange, but it's the Ancient One. And at first she's like, I'm not going to give you the stone. Strange is supposed to be the Sorcerer Supreme in 5 years, but yet is not able to see anything about the Thanos situation. It's like, okay. And then she made him into his astral form, so that way it would be easier to talk with him, I guess. And he lays down the information that Strange gave up the Time Stone, and why would he do that? And then she's like, maybe that's because I didn't do it. And she then decides to give the Time Stone to Banner. And they had talked about how with time travel, if we take a stone out, it'll start branching off ones and it'll be bedlam. But Bruce is like, if we take them and then put them back at the same time that we took them, everything should be okay. And they were even talking about this when they were doing test runs of how the time traveling would work, how it doesn't work exactly like the other stuff. Scott lamenting that Back to the Future is bullshit, and talking about how your future is in the past and your past is in the present. But we get into things that kind of start screwing some shit up. So we get Cap, he's able to get the Mind Stone, funnily enough, making a reference to the Secret Empire storyline of saying Hail Hydra to the people in S.H.I.E.L.D. and walking off with the Mind Stone. But the thing is, he also has to fight himself. That was a pretty kind of cool scene, but he's got that. Banner, of course, has the Time Stone. But Tony and Scott are not that lucky. They try to get the Tesseract, but, of course, the Past Hulk bangs into Tony. The Tesseract gets thrown out, and Loki takes it and teleports himself away. That's the first kind of issue of like, okay, is this a branching timeline now? What's going on here? You know, how... I'm like, alright, Loki disappeared from that timeline. Well, not disappeared from the timeline. He used the Space Stone and got out of there, which means he doesn't go to the point to getting taken to Asgard and Thor the Dark World and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of weird. That's where one issue starts popping up. Then we get to Thor the Dark World. Thor's freaking out about everything because not only did they go to there to get the Reality Stone from Jane, that's also the day his mother dies and he's having a panic attack and everything, and he decides to go and talk with his mom. He's following her around, and she helps kind of give him the boost that he needs to get everything done. Rocket, of course, goes on his own, gets it out, and starts getting chased by like these Asgardian guards, and Thor, before he leaves, decides to see if he is still worthy of Mjolnir, and he is able to call it to him. And he takes that out of the timeline and takes it with him into back to the present in 2023. That's important, and I'm glad that it pops up. So, since Tony and Scott screwed up in New York, Tony and Steve decide to find a better time to go get the Tesseract, and they decide to go to 1970s. And the thing is, they needed to find a time where the Tesseract and Pym particles would be in effect. So, Tony goes, gets the Tesseract, and also interacts with his father. And he learns a little bit more about his dad, and that's a cool kind of character moment. And Steve is able to get the Pym particles and, of course, see Peggy doing her stuff at S.H.I.E.L.D. and being kind of like, shit, man, this kind of sucks. He goes off, and they get that all done. We see that Rhodey and Nebula are waiting for Star-Lord to knock his ass out, and we see that Nebula is able to grab the Power Stone. And I was kind of wondering why they needed her, but they needed her because of her metal arm to like go through what's holding the Power Stone. And Rhodey gets it, they sync up, and they're trying to get through. But during this timeline, for reasons, her network overlaps with the 2014's Nebula, and that Nebula sees all these things. Thanos is able to see that, understand what's going on in the future, and they capture our heroic Nebula and figure out what's going on. And the past Nebula makes herself look like the heroic Nebula to infiltrate the Avengers. We see that Clint and Natasha have got to Vormir, and they're like, okay, how do we get the Soul Stone? And it's like, alright, one of us has to die to get the Soul Stone, and they fight over it, and the thing is, they're trying to undo the decimation, so it makes the most sense for Clint to survive, and Natasha sacrifices herself, not without some nice fighting between them to see who would do it, and she's doing this to get her family back and home, and I guess finally get her ledger out of the red. And we see that Barton wakes up with the Soul Stone and starts crying, and it sucks, man. But then that also leads to an important thing, because the Soul Stone doesn't really exist until it's purchased. So how would it be put back into the time stream? Would it refund it? Would you get that person back? I don't know. That's where a thing goes, huh? Okay. See, the thing is, Infinity War was so tightly wound, it was hard for them to, I think, figure out how to be like, okay, how did we undo this? So, I don't know. So, everybody gets back, and we've got all of our stones together and all that. We see that Nebula is also unsuspected by anybody, and we see our original core of Avengers are lamenting the loss of Natasha, but Tony makes a gauntlet, and they put the stones in there, and they're trying to figure out how to do this. Who's going to do it? Thor, of course, volunteers, but they're like, you're not in the best kind of condition to do this. And he's like, let me do something good. And just seeing him want that, and not want that, need that, sucked. It's like heartbreaking to see that. But of course, Banner goes, no, this is what I was made for. Putting off a lot of gamma radiation. So, he puts it on, and it's really messing with him, but he's able to pull off the snap. While this is going on, Nebula is able to use the portal to fucking teleport Thanos' 2014 ship into 2023. And all hell breaks loose. Breaks off through the Avengers thing. We see that we see that people have been brought back. Barton is able to contact his wife. Scott's like, I think it worked. And then Thanos begins his assault. And thus starts the climactic third act of the movie. Now this is where most of my favorite parts happen. I mean, I liked everything going on forward except for the plot issues that started to kind of pop up in my mind. We see that like everything's going down. We see that Banner is barely holding up everything underneath as Rhodey and Rocket are pretty much drowning. Ant-Man was able to shrink himself down and goes down and kind of frees them. We see Cap, Iron Man, and Thor getting ready to do battle, and we see that Thanos kind of comes down. He sends Nebula off to go get the Infinity Stones, or the Infinity Gauntlet, and he sees all his forces going down, and he just sits down and waits. And it's kind of crazy. Barton is the one holding the hot potato at the moment, and he eventually runs into Nebula, and she's trying to get the gauntlet, but Gamora and our Nebula pop up to try and stop her. And here's where the things start getting a little bit crazy. Our Nebula from 2023 shoots and it looks like kills past Nebula, but yet she doesn't flick out of existence. It's really weird. I mean, I know they explained that you couldn't kill baby Thanos and affect this kind of what would happen, but there's a certain kind of thing that would probably occur, because what is that? It starts to get kind of confusing on that kind of rationale, because a bigger thing happens later on, and I'm like, what? So that's just kind of worked around there. Got the gauntlet, and they're fighting all the forces and everything. We see that the big three start fighting Thanos, and this is a great fight. We see Thor running around with Stormbreaker and Mjolnir just fucking banging on Thanos. We see that Cap is doing everything he can in the fight as well, but Tony gets to a part where Thanos uses him as a shield, and Mjolnir kind of bounces off of him, and then, of course, Thor tries to get at him, but we see that Thanos is trying to stick Stormbreaker into Thor's chest, kind of like Thor did to Thanos in Infinity War. Then we see one of the greatest parts, and one of the things that I was been waiting for throughout this whole goddamn series. We see Mjolnir get lifted up and then thrown at Thanos, and it knocks him. And then we see it comes back, and Cap is wielding Mjolnir. I'm like, fuck yeah! And Thor's even like, I knew it. And then Cap fucking beasts it. We see him fucking twirling it around, using the lightning, and just beating on holy shit out of Thanos. I'm like, yes. I'm sorry, Cap's my favorite, and him being able to wield Mjolnir like that has been something I've been waiting for forever. So it was a great payoff. I'm like, I will take this. I will take this. And the thing is, even though he's able to do that and still have some help from some people, it's still not going well. Thanos starts beating the shit out of them, out of Cap, breaking his shield and all that. He gets knocked down, but he's able to get his shield back on, and he starts hearing something over his comm, and it sounds like Sam. He's like, hey, Cap, you there? He's like, Cap, on your left. And then we see the portals starting to open up. We see Black Panther and Shuri and Okoye come out, and then we see all of the rest of all of these heroes brought back. We see the Wakandan army coming out. We see these armies of magicians. We see Strange. We see Drax. We see Mantis. We see Quill. We see freaking Valkyrie popping up. We see Spider-Man popping up. We see all these people popping up. All of these heroes from all these films coming to fight the climactic battle against Thanos' forces. And we see the other thing that I've been waiting years for, where everybody lines up, and Cap calls Mjolnir to him, and he says, Avengers, assemble! And then they fucking beast at it, and it's like, fuck yes. This whole battle scene and everything where every character is given their due is amazing. I love it. It's such a great payoff and so epic and just works so well for all the characters and is worthy of the Avengers. So essentially this battle divulges into the game of hot potato / keep away. Thanos wants something, and Martin's of course flying around. He hands it off to Black Panther. Spider-Man's the one to get it next, and he's running around trying to keep it away from everybody. And then we see that Scarlet Witch goes and fucking ham-asses Thanos, like, is getting ready to rip him apart. And then, of course, he orders his ship to start firing down on his own troops, and it's all bedlam and chaos. But then, Captain Marvel joins the fray and destroys Thanos' ship like ain't nobody business, and it's like, alright, cool, let's see how this is going. Of course, they're trying to figure out what's going on, and figure out how to help. So they decide to use the Van's quantum realm generator to throw the Infinity Stones back in time. But of course, Thanos sees this and destroys it because we had Peter hand it off to Captain Marvel. We had an array of all these other female heroes that were kind of just helping out. We see Pepper in her Iron Man outfit, and it's fucking awesome. And they start trying to get it so that Marvel can get it into the quantum realm. But of course, Thanos throws his blade in there and it blasts it off, and he's fighting, getting ready to use the gauntlet. Captain Marvel, of course, starts banging the shit out of him, and he had to take out the Power Stone in order to knock her out. And he's about ready to do it, and Strange looks over at Tony, and they had previously, during the battle, talked about how, hey, is this it? He's like, if I say it, it won't happen. And of course, he holds up one finger, and Tony goes over and struggles with him, and Thanos, of course, still has the gauntlet on. He's like, I am inevitable. Snaps his fingers. Nothing happens. And we see that Tony was able to get them. He creates a new gauntlet on his end. He's like, yeah, I am Iron Man. And snaps his fingers. And, of course, Tony can't handle that much power. And we see that what he had done with it was to dust Thanos and his army. It was effective, and it was a nice kind of ending to Tony because he dies sacrificing himself to save the world, well, the universe, and everybody involved. And I like it for his character. I don't mind that. The only issue is you dusted 2014 Thanos, and it just starts doing paradoxes and crazy things in my head like, what? What? I almost thought it would have been more effective to start shooting off the different stones to different people and doing stuff that way. Because you only need the reality stone to really take out. Or you could have just teleported him. It's mainly the issue of who would be able to handle the power. I mean, the Hulk was kind of half commissioned because of what was going on, using all of them. There are other ways this could have went. I'm not angry that Tony died. It was a fitting death, but the things around it and the consequences of the action are just like, what? So, do we have another reality going crazy or whatnot? But it's a touching moment because we see that it's like the reverse of Infinity War where Peter Parker's breaking the fuck down as he sees his mentor die. Pepper comes up, Rhodey, and we see Cap crying and Thor being affected and all that. It's like, damn, that sucks. But it's a fitting end to Tony's character. It's the complete arc. He went from a selfish arms dealer to a man who had a family with all these people, and he chose to give up his own life to save all those that he could. And that's cool. So, we get a nice funeral of his. We see all these cool players in effect, and we see this kid that at first I'm like, who's that? And it's like, oh, it's the kid from Iron Man 3. And I'm like, hey, he could work out being Iron Man to a degree until Tony's daughter Morgan gets of age, because she's like a 4 or 5 year old cute kid, and she's talking with Happy, and Happy's like, hey, can I do anything for you? She's like, I like cheeseburgers, and he's like, well, your dad liked cheeseburgers. And he had left a recording, and they listened to the recording and everything. I was wondering if they could potentially have Tony maybe make cameos as like an AI or something, because they've done that in the comics as well. And they had done a little thing at their house where they let it floating into the water with the arc reactor, proving that Tony had a heart. Another issue that kind of pops up is that the people that were done by the decimation snap were brought into this time period. So no time had passed for them. And the issue was, they're like, dude, Peter's kind of screwed because if he goes back to high school, all of his friends would have like graduated college by now. And evidently most of his friends had got decimated by the snap as well. It's just like, what? This is gonna be weird. Okay. And we get that Thor and the Guardians are doing their own thing, and Quill is trying to find Gamora, because I guess evidently the past Gamora is now here, and she's off doing her own thing, which I don't understand, because, now granted, she could have found like a ship from Thanos' ship and blasted off, but it was kind of like, okay. Thor makes Valkyrie the king, queen, ruler of Asgard, and decides to go off with the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is kind of a weird thing, because he says, I'm done trying to be what I'm supposed to be and just going to be me. Like, okay, you kind of turn into Volstagg. I mean, you can do thunder and everything, but we'll see kind of how that goes. And he goes and makes a reference to the Asgardians of the Galaxy, and then kind of playfully fights with Quill to be kind of the leader of the ship. I'm like, you just said you shouldn't be a leader? I mean, I know it's done for comedic purposes, but it's like, okay, alright. I mean, I'm all for Thor in space and doing all that kind of stuff, and we'll kind of see how that works out. And the last portion we get of the movie is that Banner is working with Bucky and Sam and Cap, and they're going to put the stones back in their proper times. Which is kind of weird, because usually the Space Stone is in the Tesseract form, and I don't know how you would make that back. And then, of course, we bring up the whole issues with the Soul Stone. But Cap goes and takes them back, as well as Mjolnir. And they were going to bring him back to this time, but he decides not to and stays and has his dance and lives his life with Peggy, because we see an older Steve Rogers there, and Bucky points him out, and Sam goes up to him. He's like, wow, so without anything kind of thing? He's like, no, it's really kind of weird. That is a nice payoff for Cap, seeing him old and then hand off his shield to Sam to be Captain America. I don't have issues with that. Sam definitely deserves this shield. I mean, Bucky, I know in the comics Bucky usually had gotten it first, but I mean, Bucky still has a lot of things to work through, and I have no problem with Sam being Captain America. Here's where the issues start to arise. How Steve going back in time would affect the time stream, because Peggy would be married to someone who looks like Captain America, and he would be frozen in the ice. Would there be two Caps roaming around? What about the whole scene with him and Peggy and the Winter Soldier? Let's see. This Cap goes back with the information that S.H.I.E.L.D. is being infiltrated by Hydra, and that Bucky is still alive. Does he not do anything with those bits of information? And if so, how would that turn into... How would that allow him to go into this? Is this an alternate timeline? It gets messy. I like the end goal, but there should have been cleaner ways to get to it. And it also kind of is weird on a character level, because Steve had just seen one of his best friends die to protect the universe. Granted, I understand that Steve deserves a happy ending, but I would have almost rather had him be like, accept what has occurred and accept how they have fixed things and stay there and help make sure that Tony's last act is truly honored and not in vain. I wouldn't have minded if he's like, you know what, I don't need to be Captain America, and still had given off his shield to Sam, and instead just been a teacher for a new generation of Avengers, or a new director of S.H.I.E.L.D., or a new organization for intelligence gathering that would work on the side of the Avengers or whatnot. There's multiple different ways that that could have worked out as well. And you would have still had Cap having a good kind of ending, and you could still kind of look forward to him in the future, have him more in a cameo role or a very diminished role. I don't know. It just opened up more of a can of worms than I thought it would, especially when I've seen it. Now, granted, I've only seen the end once, but seeing the rest of it, I'm like, okay, so I still enjoyed this movie and got a lot of parts that I liked out of it. It's just, I don't think it's a. The biggest issue is that Infinity War was so well done that they're like, damn it, we've written ourselves into a corner. How do we defeat Thanos when we made it so that way his win was so kind of clean? And here's how we got it. It doesn't really diminish the parts that I enjoy, but I'm like, there are issues that we're gonna have to kind of deal with, maybe. Or maybe a cosmic reset could occur. We need to get in the X-Men and the Fantastic Four somehow. So, overall, I enjoyed this movie. I really liked how certain characters got the emotional payoff and send-offs that they deserved. It's just, it got messy with the time travel aspect, and that always happens. There's a lot of movies that do time travel, but there's not a lot of them that can do it well, because it's so tricky to mess around with time and those kind of actions and everything. So, we'll have to see how these affect movies going forward and all that, and I can't wait to see what certain things happen with, like, Sam being Cap, seeing Thor in the Guardians of the Galaxy, seeing what they're going to do with Iron Man and who's going to take up the mantle of that, and where we're going to go with, like, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, and all that, and see what the next kind of iteration of the MCU will be. And it was okay that there wasn't anything teased at the end of these credits, because they have to take time to plan out what's going to go on next. So, those are my opinions on the movie. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.